In part one of this series, we told you about the Center for Voter Information and the Blue Wave postcard movement that had sent unsolicited mail to a deceased voter in Wisconsin. The Blue Wave postcard movement is a not-for-profit organization registered in Boulder, Colorado, and founded by Ning Mosberger Tang. What we didn't tell you is that before the Blue Wave postcard movement, Tang was able to secure PPE for hospitals in the U.S. and imported them from China using her powerful connections, and ultimately became a reluctant expert on the importing of personal protective equipment from China. This was before she began sending data harvesting postcards to deceased voters in Wisconsin, sold through her organization's website in lots of 2,000, with names and address labels included, along with very clear messaging that states the Democratic Governor Tony Evers has been able to prevent the Republican-led legislature from enacting much of their radical agenda, and goes on to pit Democrat Mandela Barnes against Trump-backed MAGA Senator Ron Johnson. At least one of these postcards was addressed and labeled again, a third time, to our deceased Wisconsin voter on September 6th of 2022. This time from Carroll Stream, Illinois. The digital data marked on this postcard has replaced the MyVote system with a new website called Wisconsin votemail.us. A domain registered to Ning Mosberger Tang and the Blue Wave postcard movement, which delivers users to a strange doorway portal page to MyVote, and paid for by an organization called Tech Campaigns, and allegedly not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. These friendly people will help you request your absentee by mail ballot so that you can vote. Check that your local elections office received your request. Check that your local elections office has sent your absentee ballot by mail, and answer questions about how to complete the ballot, even going so far as to check that your local elections office has received your ballot after you've sent it in. Let's be fair, that's a heck of a service, especially if you're an indefinitely confined deceased voter. Thanks a lot, Lynn. Your postcard makes this the fifth piece of unsolicited mail to our deceased Wisconsin voter, encouraging them to register their absentee ballot at MyVote. As we told you in part one, the family members were able to confirm that the lost loved one was still active and registered within the MyVote system, and still today, at the time of the publishing of this video, is currently active and registered in the system, with their absentee ballot available to be sent anywhere in the world. And we feel just one deceased Wisconsin voter is one too many. Wouldn't you agree? It is a fact that this deceased voter's address and name was included in a label that was sold by the Blue Wave postcard movement. Upon a closer look at the actual product shot of the box of postcards, we were able to see the names and addresses of various Wisconsinites, which we intentionally have blurred. Cross-referencing these names revealed a visible list that contained names that matched at least 5 recent Wisconsin obituaries. We know that our particular Wisconsin individual died due to COVID complications 2 years ago, which now furthers the questions: how and where did Blue Wave get the names and information? How many other deceased voters received unsolicited absentee ballot request postcards from Blue Wave? How many of those solicitations resulted in a deceased voter obtaining their absentee ballots? And how many of those absentee ballots were actually cast? Maybe she got the lists during her good humanitarian efforts of bringing PPE into hospitals nationwide, or perhaps they came from her social circle of influences and friends in high places. Friends like Dr. Lisa Minsky-Primus, who happens to sit on the board for the League of Conservation Voters, right beside Ning Mosberger Tang, an organization that are known donors to the Center for Voter Information, who Lisa Minsky-Primus happens to be also a board member of. And as we told you in part one, CVI is the same organization that sent an unsolicited, pre-filled absentee ballot application to our deceased Wisconsin voter, which in a recent complaint filed with the Wisconsin Election Commission claims these absentee ballot request forms not only are fraudulent and counterfeit, but illegal and are in violation of several Wisconsin state statutes. Remarkably, on the same day this letter was dated, the Wisconsin Elections Commission's website advertised third-party absentee ballot request forms that were being sent by the Center of Voter Information and informed clerks the absentee ballot request form should be treated as any other absentee ballot request form they may receive by mail. They even posted file downloads to all three of CVI's sample application request forms, CWI, DWI, and RWI, apparently some sort of a hidden code for a trained eye. Let's put that into perspective. This is a marked deck of cards available at almost any magic shop. When introduced to a would-be spectator, they fly completely under the radar. Yet to a trained eye, anyone can see this is the ace of spades. Here's the four of diamonds, and now your eye is trained, and I don't even have to say what the last card is. Nevertheless, the Center for Voter Information will say one thing to you if you are an RWI, pointing out that 62% of voters in Wisconsin cast their ballots before Election Day in the 2020 election. But to the DWIs, they go on to say if your vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to take it away and make voting more difficult. Going on to say in 2020, voters braved COVID, voting suppression tactics, and intimidation at the ballot box, and raising the percentage to 73% of the voters cast their ballots before Election Day in 2020. We're absolutely appalled that the Center for Voter Information was allowed to send over 600,000 of these specially marked absentee ballot request forms to Wisconsinites. Marking these absentee ballot request forms just like a magician marks a deck of cards. However, if a casino were caught playing with a marked deck, that casino would cease to exist. And for the Wisconsin Elections Commission to say that these absentee ballot request forms should be treated as any other absentee ballot request form you may receive is pure insanity. Either they said this knowingly or they said it ignorantly. Either way, it was negligent, and they failed to take proper care of the Wisconsin election system, allowing or approving or suggesting to any clerk that these applications are fair. WEC states in this update, CVI had told them they're sending this mailing to roughly 667,000 people. Maybe it was CVI's board member Lisa Minsky-Primus who informed WEC of these mailings, who as an individual donated over $400,000 to the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, Tony Evers and Josh Kaul, the same Attorney General that filed charges against Harry Waite, who admitted openly to requesting absentee ballots through a MyVote vulnerability, which Wisconsin Elections Commissioner Ann Jacobs said he did so intentionally under the guise of some sort of a weird attack on our absentee voting system, which, if you don't break the law, works very well. But that statement doesn't reflect those that may have broken election laws and never got caught for it. Yet Harry Waite has been honest, open, and transparent about everything and exactly what he did long before he actually received ballots. Despite the fact that the factual basis of Harry's complaint begins on Thursday, July 28, 2022, when the Wisconsin Elections Commission, WEC, notified DCI that a Freedom Fighters of Wisconsin Facebook post contained a message of a claim of someone requesting absentee ballots in other people's names. And as you will see, the factual basis listed in Harry's complaint began long before that. It started on the night of July 26th at 6:49 p.m. Harry requested Individual 1's ballot. Then 9 minutes later, Individual 2 at 6:58 p.m. These are the only two individuals that didn't have knowledge of this. 18 minutes later, at 7:16 p.m., Harry orders individual 3. 7 minutes later, individual 4. 7 minutes after that, individual 5. 6 minutes later, individual 6. Then 122 minutes later, after waiting on individual 7's permission. And by 8:58 p.m. that evening, he had requested the final ballot. He then stops and orders no more. 373 minutes later, roughly 6 hours on July 27th at 3:13 a.m., Harry blows the whistle and sends an email to individuals 1 and 2, the local Racine County Sheriff and the District Attorney, less than 6 hours after completing his sting. The real stopwatch had only just begun. 3 hours and 47 minutes after Harry's email, at 7 a.m. on the morning of the 27th, Mayor Corey Mason put out a Facebook post on Wisdom Wednesday regarding absentee voting. 11:15 a.m. 8 hours after Harry sent the email, he's contacted by Sheriff Schmaling of Racine County Sheriff Department. Roughly 45 minutes after that, he's contacted by Sergeant Llewell, also of the Racine County Sheriff's Office. Then, 10.5 hours later, the press makes their first contact at 1:27 p.m. Remarkably, 11 hours after Harry had sent his email, the ballot of individual 2 was postmarked at 2 p.m. It was on its way. Then, 11 hours and 38 minutes after Harry's email, the Sheriff's Office of Racine announced a formal media release stating that not 1 but 2 complainants had tested the vulnerability of the MyVote system, and went on to say, based on this serious threat to our voter integrity, the Sheriff's Office has contacted the Wisconsin Attorney General and the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Yet the factual basis of Harry's complaint seems to say that July 27th at 5:38 p.m., Harry Waite posted a message forwarded by individual 8 containing an apparent post from the Racine County Sheriff's Office, and goes on to say the RCSO had been contacted related to complaints reporting apparent vulnerabilities, end quote. This was not an apparent post, and this was not an apparent vulnerability. At this point, the Sheriff's Office had already contacted WEC and the Attorney General's Office. A little over an hour later, the story broke in Wisconsin News and Wisconsin Right Now. The press coverage had begun at 3:46 p.m., covering the Racine County Sheriff's Office and not naming any names, only referring to, just as what the sheriff had done, complainant 1 and complainant 2. Now, at 5:38 p.m., 14 hours and 25 minutes after Harry's email, Adrian Melby forwarded the Racine County Sheriff's Office post to Hot Government Telegram channel. We would learn later that Adrian Melby was complainant number 1. But at this point in time, the complainants were anonymous, which is strange considering that 14 hours and 32 minutes after the email, WISN contacts Harry directly at 5:45 p.m., followed by the Gateway Pundit publishing Harry's email that was sent earlier that morning to a handful of individuals at 7:15 p.m. However, the Gateway Pundit story signs the email Harry W. At this point, Harry goes public and posts his own email at 7:26 p.m. to Hot Government. And it's not until after that, at 7:29 p.m., 16 hours and 16 minutes after the email, that the Freedom Fighters of Central Wisconsin post the email to Facebook. Understanding that now, rereading the beginning of the factual basis, on Thursday, July 28, 2022, the Wisconsin Election Commissions notified DCI that this Facebook post had been posted, which is what started the factual basis in Harry's complaint. We also know that both the Attorney General's Office and WEC had been contacted by law enforcement. Meanwhile, WEC commissioners and staffers were conducting interviews by phone and email, with press spinning their own narrative to the Racine Journal-Times. In that article at 9:15, Vetterkind is very clear in saying, quote, "There is no indication of any vulnerability with the MyVote application." He goes on to say the idea that absentee ballot requests made online via MyVote are more susceptible to fraud is false. That is an accurate statement when you consider the Center for Voter Information's applications and blue wave postcards that encourage deceased voters to vote and even offer to help them do it. The man who wrote the article, Adam Rogan, mentions also if someone were to request another person's absentee ballot and then vote in their name, the fraudster could be found out if the individual whose ballot was illegally requested tried to vote or even looked up whether they requested a ballot via MyVote Wisconsin. The thought is they would get caught. He goes on to say to ensure that they would get away with it, the person who surreptitiously requested someone else's ballot would need to know that the individual whose ballot they were stealing had no plans to vote, but still is a registered voter with their voter ID on file. And unless a zombie apocalypse happens, there are not going to be any dead voters that show up at the polls to be told you already voted. My suspicion is that if we looked through the Racine Journal-Times recent obituaries, we'd find several people registered and active within the MyVote system. The following day, on July 28th, 1 day, 3 hours, and 2 minutes after Harry's email, on or around 6:15, we have reason to believe Administrator Megan Wolf began organizing a special meeting that would assemble the commissioners at 8 p.m. that evening. At 7:25 a.m. that morning, Hot Government would release on the Rumble channel the actual video of Harry requesting the ballots. At 7:36 a.m., Commissioner Ann Jacobs would reply in a tweet to a user who pointed out the Racine County Sheriff's post to her, simply linked the user to the Journal-Times article from the night before. Then at 8:23 a.m., the morning of July 28th, 1 day, 5 hours, and 10 minutes after Harry blew the whistle, the complaint states, Voter Individual 1's absentee ballot had been requested again, this time by a Macintosh computer. Harry does not own a Macintosh. Harry did not request this ballot. Someone requested this at 8:23 a.m. on July 28th. This individual's ballot was requested to be sent to the Czech Republic, to an address of an office building that houses a company called Vendavo, which has had a more than 8-year relationship with Wisconsin-based Diane Hendricks' company, ABC Supply, who happens to be the largest individual donor to the Republican Party of Wisconsin. I would challenge anyone to find a deeper connection to Harry Waite and that address than the individual himself. Moments later, at 8:38 a.m. that morning, Commissioner Jacobs tweets again saying, quote, I broke the law to prove I could break the law, end quote. By 1:36 p.m. that afternoon, WEC had released its statement that there was no indication of MyVote vulnerability, regurgitating just about everything in the Journal-Times interview from the night before. Shortly after that, WISN posted a developing story about the Wisconsin Elections Commission holding its special meeting that night at 8 p.m. regarding alleged unlawful absentee ballot requests and mitigation strategies. Remarkably, just 4 minutes before, WISN would connect with Harry at the Racine County Fair and interview him on camera, which became breaking news at 5 p.m. on July 28th, 1 day, 13 hours, and 47 minutes after Harry had blown the whistle. Moments later, at 5:09 p.m., Corey Mason, mayor of Racine, would make his public statement, which seemed to coordinate with Voss releasing a statement at 5:21 p.m., with one reporter tweeting, right on cue. And by 8 p.m. that evening, the Wisconsin Elections Commission would meet in their special meeting, regurgitating the spin that had been created, alleging that had Waite actually tried to vote on behalf of Voss or Mason, it's unlikely that he wouldn't have been caught. That's because whenever Voss or Mason did try to vote, the WEC system would have been flagged that they already cast ballots, even though they hadn't. Listen closely to what Commissioner Mark Thompson says during that meeting.
I thought we were here to protect Speaker Voss and stop fraud in the state.
Which is it, Commissioner? Are you there to protect Speaker Voss or stop fraud in the state? Because it appears you can't have it both ways. This has been the end of this special report. We will continue to keep this up to date. Stay tuned as this story develops.